James, in case people didn't see, we do have a video already up from week 9, on the road with
Yeah.
Wesley video, and hopefully folks will get to see that a little bit. Wesley fans may have come over to this video because we promised to talk about our proposed regional rankings, but before we get there,
hmm
we got to talk about a few things. Let's talk about how we got here in the first place, the games from week
Okay.
9, and what
Yep.
happens from here on out. So the order of events for host chat here, for those wondering and if that want to fast forward, because we understand you've got things to do. You're busy people. We are too. That's why
Yes.
this wasn't up on
Yeah.
Sunday. But we're going to
Exactly.
go through all the games of week 9. Then we're going to go through our mock regional rankings, and then we're going to talk about scenarios for this coming Saturday as well. Not predict them, but just kind of inform you where things can fall out along the way. So
Yep.
let's first talk about the games briefly from this Saturday. I think you said you wanted to start with the CCC, who
Yeah.
has a
Well,
few
we
games
had.
under the belt finally. Yay!
Yeah, exactly. And Anthony Service, their quarterback, was a great guest last week. So yeah, I was interested to see how he was going to do in
Western
the
New England,
first
right?
of two of basically two elimination style games. They took on Salve, which is one of their rivals, and I watched a little bit of that game on Saturday, and Service and company did not disappoint, but it really was, I think, a defensive pick six in the fourth quarter that really put that game away for the Golden Bears, because Salve did try to make a comeback in that one up until that point, and so Western New England in the driver's seat on one hand, but you also have on the other Curry, who's still up there tied with them in the standings, and they face off in effectively the CCC championship type of game this Saturday.
Yeah, just to clarify, it was 28-20 when that interception return for touchdown, and
Mhm.
Jolliker, I think, is the name of
Yeah.
the player that intercepted at 49 yards to make it
hmm
35-30 ultimately, and that did seal the fate with about 4 minutes left. But Curry does have a lot to say here. Western New England at Curry, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. Let's keep going through the games from the weekend, though, before we go there. And next stop, Newmac, let's say.
Yeah, well, the guys who are Wicked Smart Bowl was between WPI and MIT, two of our favorite coaches, Robertson against
Tinovich.
Martinovich, sorry. And that was a really
You're going to
entertaining
pay for
game
that
too.
one. I'm going to make sure he hears
Yeah,
that.
thanks. Yeah, sorry, Chad, my bad. I'll buy you a beer when you come to Orlando in the spring. We'll see you then.
There you go.
Um, but yeah, that was a back and forth affair. Could have gone either way. WPI kind of took advantage of some mistakes. The real, I think, backbreaker might have been that pick six at the very end of the first half. It gave WPI, I believe, a 17-7 lead at halftime, and then they kind of had to hang in there and really rode their defense in the second half to eke out a 24-21 win. That's kind of puts MIT on the outside looking in. They're not fully eliminated from the NUMAC title situation just yet, but it sort of puts more onus on Springfield to keep winning. They were idle, and they have a couple more games left. So if they can go 10-0, they should be in good shape, either for a B or a C bid. But we'll see what goes from there.
So we go from there. Again, we'll talk about what the scenarios are in a bit. Let's go to the ECFC, and I think the kind of script has been true to form for a while. We've been talking about this Husson team, and yeah, I didn't even see the final score in this game, and I'm just looking at it right now, and I'm like, holy cow,
70-13. Yeah.
671 yards by Husson in this win.
Yeah.
That's incredible, and I'm going to guess that John Smith had a few yards, like 247 and 4 touchdowns. Yeah, ho-hum day, John. We really
Yeah.
have you on. We get 300 yards on this show. You know that. Come on, John Smith. No, that's incredible.
Yeah.
On just 14 carries. Think about that. 14
Yeah.
carries, 247. Husson is who we think they are
Amazing.
right now.
Yeah, and Anna Maria still getting their program up and running, so kind of not surprised. Gallaudet won in pretty decisive fashion against Dean and Alfred State. Hey, another kind of newer program that's out there. They got their first win behind Keegan Brown's 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. So congrats to the Pioneers. Hey, we obviously are going to be talking a lot more about playoff teams, but you also have to let these other new programs out there get the shout outs when they get their wins, because they're few and far between when you're in the early stages of getting a program up and running. So congrats to them, and more power to them.
Hey, I got to say though, we had a note from a freshman. We don't usually do interviews with freshmen, but on our Facebook page, we got a message. This probably will break open the dam by even mentioning this right now, but here we go. I think it was Brian McLean from Anna Maria College. He's actually from Montgomery, Alabama. He's a freshman linebacker. And he called to our attention, and we don't mind this at all, that he broke 2 of the school's records and is 4 sacks away from the career record at Anna Maria. Now, obviously, it's a short list here currently he's going up against, but as a freshman, it's a great thing to see. And, keep going on there, Brian. Keep doing it because, we highlighted the AMCAT's win the previous week in crunch time and everything else. And, look, these young programs like Anna Maria and Dean and whatnot are young to us at least. We want to see them keep winning and keep improving because that's what makes us exciting, these races. So good luck to players like him and his team as they complete their season. That is kind of the story of the ECFC. Nothing else jumping out except SUNY Maritime still putting up 60-plus on Castleton. Incredible. And Gallaudet beating Dean, as we were pointing out. Now, as we go, we're not going to quite leave the New England area yet. Sorry, I just want to make sure I have the scores up here because this is the one that gets confusing to people. Everybody wants to say, and I think Keith McMillan did this in Around the Nation today, at first saying Plymouth State has the lead. But when you look at the loss column and then look at the schedule that's already played out in the MASCAC, the answer kind of is right now that Western Connecticut is the leader technically in the conference, and they had to fight one out again. I think we predicted just this scenario last week in Lightning Predictions. They beat Fitchburg State 55-34. Just a very scrappy team, this WestCon team. You can't put your finger on what their games are going to look like week to week, but there's another example, 89 points between the two teams.
Yeah, and I think it's everything is sort of leading to a head because WestCon has to play Framingham State this weekend, and that's a big game for the MASCAC. So Plymouth State is probably even with 8-1 overall record. Not a lot of teams have 8 wins in this region or in most regions. But they may be finding themselves, ironically, on the outside looking in, depending on how this game goes and in the regional rankings.
Talk more about those in a moment, but let's keep rolling here with our conference review. And Liberty League, I know you were paying attention to that RPI St. Lawrence game that almost bit RPI, and if it had, we'd be looking at a championship game this Saturday between Union and Ithaca, but RPI holds on and still has some say in the race, especially in the Dutchman Shoes game, but they have to get through Rochester next week. More on that in a second. First things first, St. Lawrence drops one that they probably should have had in some people's eyes.
Yeah, they did score a go-ahead, what at the time was a go-ahead touchdown with about 2 minutes remaining, and you have to give RPI and this George Marianopoulos, is that how you say his name?
Marianopoulos.
It's Marianopoulos, yeah. So he's a freshman quarterback, and he just led his team down the field and got him the game-winning touchdown. I was thinking that maybe we'd have some clarity on the Liberty League race, but not so much. We do have a little bit of clarity on the Empire State Bowl, which is going to be between effectively the runners-up of the Liberty League and Empire 8. I think we should sort of wait on that until next week. Let's see how it gets through this weekend, because there could be a potential 2 or 3-way tie for that second place, depending on what happens between Union and Ithaca and Hobart and St. Lawrence.
Well, we'll say this much. If you're worried about the idea that you could have a replay of a game that we've already seen, let's say, then you could. That's the long story short. We talked to Tracy King, who is the commissioner of the Liberty League, and his answer was this. It's up to the teams at the end of the day. The current write-up of this thing is that it will be a 2-team scenario, the second place versus the second place, or the top non-playoff going team, we should say, versus the top non-playoff going team in the other conference. The Empire 8, if Brockport wins this week, there will be only one team going from the Empire 8. RPI right now is still rearing its head, like we said, and we doubt that there's going to be a second team from the Liberty League going, but they may see a couple teams in the regional rankings right now. It's something to keep your eye on. That said, the teams will decide whether or not they want to play in that game. They are free to file for ECACs as well. That's important to know. And so that's why you'll see, as we talk about it next week more so, Liberty League teams or Empire 8 teams that have filed for the ECACs. They can choose one over the other. It's up to them. It's kind of a little bit different than a normal bowl setup in that respect, because normally it's the bowls calling up saying, hey, come play, and you say yes because it's usually the best remaining bowl out there that's calling you at that point in time. But here, you have a choice for if you're a team in the New York conferences, and we'll see how it plays out. But there's that. Empire 8, well, hold on. We should probably bring up, as we transition to the Empire 8, the Ithaca blanked Utica, which I did not see coming. That's a very big win for Ithaca to blank a Utica team at Utica, no less, 14-0.
Yeah.
So then the Empire 8 itself, I was just going to say.
Well, one of the upsets, Frank, that you should take some credit for picking was St. John Fisher surprising Cortland in a game where I was, Cortland looked like to me, a pretty solid second place finisher in the Empire 8, which is, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a year in, year out. It's always one of the toughest conferences in the East region, if not the country. But James Chambers, man, talk about finishing your career with a bang. He had like 200 rushing yards, basically. There's 199 or something like that. Really impressive, really impressive finish. And hey, Frank, I just got a thing on Facebook. Someone asking us about where Husson will land in the East Regional rankings. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Thanks for the question. You want to name names on that by any chance?
It was from Jordan Schufelt, I believe. He's asking us about
throw the easy names at you today, huh?
Yeah, right. Gee, thanks. So hey,
no problem.
Good timing.
Hey, Brockport
blanking.
Brockport blanking Buffalo State. They blanked Hartwick the week before that. This is an impressive team.
Yeah, and although what you'll see in our mock rankings, they don't have any wins over regionally ranked teams, but the way they are beating teams, it's like kind of Mount Union-esque. I mean, their defense is shutting people down, their offense is putting up over 30 something points every week. Traditionally, if you have an undefeated Empire 8 champion, you're looking at, I think, at worst case scenario, a quote unquote 2 seed in one of the pairings with the ones. So I think Brockport could be in a position to get a very favorable slot in the NCAAs if they can keep this up. They've still got a couple more games left. But
hold that thought, though. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Let's go to the NJAC, and we talked a little bit about it during our Wesley on the road video. They win 26-7. We went over that game in that. We won't go too much into it right now here. Kane beating Christopher Newport 27-7. That surprised me. That's not part of the whole race going on here in the NJAC, but at the same time, Christopher Newport just having a disappointing season, and that's a big win for Kane. Salisbury blanking Rowan, didn't see that coming necessarily to that degree, and Salisbury puts up a big exclamation point heading into the Route 13 showdown with Wesley. And, that's kind of the setup. Frostburg had the week off as they prep to watch, basically, but they play Kane. Maybe Frostburg better wake up here after this bye actually, I take that back. They play on Friday night, so they have an extra day. Okay. I keep missing those Friday games, 35-3 over Southern Virginia. Now, Frostburg still has to stay awake here because Kane is coming up. And that's going to be interesting to see. I think Kane's going to give him a challenge. In the meantime, the Route 13 showdown will be going on. That's always a challenge. And, it's just tough to predict. You and I kind of know where we're leaning in that game, but Wesley's got to play better than they did against Montclair State for our prediction to come to fruition.
Yeah, and hey, shout out to the NJAC because they have 3 teams in the top 25 right now with Wesley, Frostburg, and Salisbury. I think, unfortunately, though, only one of those teams will likely end up making it into the tournament. A 9-1 Frostburg team is going to be potentially on the bubble. We'll see how it all plays out. But like you said, Frank, you can't look past Charles App and the Cougars. They've won a couple in a row now, and they're always a tough out no matter what position they're in the NJAC. So Frostburg's going to just have to keep winning and hope for some breaks and luck here and there.
In the MAC, Del Val 35-0 over Lebanon Valley. Their defense is really stepping up as well with that offense.
Yep.
Incredible job there.
Yeah.
Widener nudges Stevenson 20-14. That could have really been the death knell to the MAC race if that had happened the other way around.
Number 700.
What's up? Oh, number 700 for Widener. Good point. Yeah, it was their 700th win. One of only maybe like 4 programs that have done that in history.
Yeah, I think it was like Washington, Jefferson, Mount Union, and one other school that was on the list. I'm sure it's probably one of the traditional powers. Of just it's slipped my brain, which a lot of stuff does these days. But Widener's still keeping in the hunt for the potential championship showdown with Del Val in Week 11. So. Congrats to the Pride on what was a pretty close call. Stevenson, we thought might have caught them off guard, but they got the job done.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Let's see. Mount Union, Wittenberg, and Washington and Jefferson are the answers to your question.
Yeah, Wittenberg. Okay.
Who beat Wabash in a close one this week as well, but the
favorites Wally
pulled it out. So, okay. Yeah, good point. Let's now go to the mock regional rankings. These are not the committee's rankings. What we did was we applied what the criteria are, what we're told. We don't like these criteria necessarily. Let's be clear about this. I think the strength of schedule number that they've concocted, when you have this little data to go into them, frankly sucks. It just doesn't belong. I think you need to begin to also rank conferences and then the teams inside the conferences to have any kind of merit in this whole thing, because at least you start gaining more data points at that point. I think we can all eyeball Union's schedule and say that's kind of a weak schedule overall, in a non-conference style. But they're going to have one of the better strength of schedule numbers in the country when the season is said and done. That's how awkward this number becomes. So, again, I'm not trying to tool on Union's schedule here, but at the same time, you know what you know, and then the numbers come out and say, really? Okay. The Husson game, sure, to their credit, Curry ends up being better than they look, but on a national scale are Husson and Curry, Mount Union, and Whitewater, yet they go into those numbers in a very similar fashion as Mount Union and Whitewater would go into those numbers at the end of the day. That's the problem with strength of schedule. It's completely objective, not subjective at all. And there has to be, with this little information, a little bit more subjectivity, I think, allowed into the mix. And they've done a little bit over time. That's at least why 2 lost teams have jumped 1 lost teams in these. Let's look at these. Here we go. We lead off with Delaware Valley, 8-0 with a 539 and a win versus Wesley, to their credit. I don't think that's a surprise to many people. The win versus Albright would be useful if Albright is ranked. They may be. We're not saying they won't be, but currently we think that Albright is not in the rankings, so that's why it's showing up that way. Here's what you alluded to earlier, and I think Springfield folks might have some good qualms about this. Brockport 8-0, Springfield 8-0, but we put Brockport number 2, Springfield 3. Now, Springfield has what we call a regionally ranked opponent win against Western New England. We believe Western New England does appear in these since they are leading, at least de facto right now, the CCC. The problem is that Brockport, I think this is where subjectivity does play in a little bit. Brockport's AD is one of the co-chairs of the regional committee that comes up with these. They call it the RAC. And so he won't be on the call, I don't think, for this portion of it. He can't talk about Brockport while Brockport's in discussion. But once they settle on Brockport being placed, he can rejoin the call. I think that he gets probably a number 2 here from his cohorts on that call. It's nothing unusual. It's nothing untoward that's going on. It's just the way it goes. I think there's going to be enough discussion to say what you said. Look at these scores. Brockport has played some really good teams using the eye test well. Springfield's played some teams that maybe of a lesser degree equally well, but we're more impressed by what we're seeing on the Ledger side of
Yeah.
Brockport than Springfield.
Yeah, and then although they're not technically a criteria, if you look at the D3Football.com top 25, and the AFCA just released their top 25 earlier today. Brockport's 10 and 12 respectively. Springfield is in the 21, 22 range. So that from that kind of ranking perspective, you would say, well, yeah, Brockport is higher up than Springfield, so they should be higher up on the regional rankings too.
But Springfield fans should be happy that we're not putting Wesley above them, because that's very possible as well. Wesley could very well be number 3 when this comes out, and if that happens, I would be a little bit ticked off if I were a Springfield fan. I'm not going to lie, but the way that Wesley's playing doesn't merit, I don't think, going to number 3 right now. If they beat Salisbury, we can rediscuss that scenario at that point, especially depending on where Salisbury falls the following week. But they have a win versus Frostburg, which we think is a ranked team, and a loss versus Delaware Valley. And as we always say, the committee favors even losses against regionally ranked teams, because if your loss is against an unranked team, that means you lost to a team that's probably beneath you. And so in this case, it was a loss to somebody above them.
And that week 1 game against Del Val was close. I mean, really, it just came down to a turnover, scoop, and score touchdown. So it could have gone either way.
Husson is next at 6-1, and the reason they're 6-1 regional rankings purposes is because the Dean game does not count. They are not a third-year program yet, and as such, it is not considered a regional game. So the record is 6-1 for regional rankings purposes, 7-1 overall, and they have a win versus Union, who is going to be a ranked team almost de facto here by leading the Liberty League, but a loss versus Western New England. So Western New England fans can kind of breathe easily, because that Husson win by them kind of helps forgive an extra loss a little bit in terms of what ultimately could be seeding purposes later on if Western New England beats Curry. So that's important to note, that Husson is buoyed by the win versus Union, but then sort of that loss versus Western New England puts a ceiling on how high they can go at the end of the day. Union next is 7-1. The loss to Husson is the only thing that stands out, and their SOS is at 521. Again, it's 521 by numbers. You wouldn't expect that if you just looked at the schedule and saw the teams they're playing. But right now, it's going to go up, not down. They've got Ithaca left and RPI left. That's those are 2 teams that will help that strength of schedule number go up. Speaking of which, who's number 7? RPI. 6-2. But look at the strength of schedule right now before they play Rochester. But they will play Union, so it counterbalances. It's not going to go down much if it goes down. 563. They're number 30 nationally right now in strength of schedule number. And they have a win versus Western New England, but 2 losses versus unranked teams. And this makes them a wild card. Will the committee view them as favorably as we do right now? That's a question.
It's hard to say, especially with that 30-0 loss to Hobart a couple of weeks ago, and barely getting by what is now only a 2-win St. Lawrence team. So on one hand, this will be an interesting sort of fact check for us to see if the committee goes sort of by the book, or if they do some subjective analysis and say, you know what, RPI, they've lost a couple games, and maybe they shouldn't be ranked as high. We'll find out.
Yeah, and really you have a matched pair here, because RPI should be above Western New England at all times, and here they are at number 8. Western New England lost to RPI. They both have 2 losses. RPI has the better strength of schedule, both objectively and subjectively, but Western New England has 2 losses to ranked teams, Springfield and RPI. So you can account for the 2 losses against ranked teams. You've got the win versus Husson in there. I just feel like RPI has to be viewed better right now than Western New England based on the head-to-head, with 2 losses both on their ledger right now. But those teams are sort of causing a problem for this committee, because any other day the Regional Advisory Committee would probably say about an RPI team, no. But because of this match pair scenario, if they put in Western New England, I think they have to put in RPI. Which brings up number 9. And this is kind of the biggest wild card out there. We don't know what they're going to do
Yeah.
with this team. Frostburg. There
Yeah.
was a point where we left them out entirely when we were coming up with these. And then we were
Yeah.
like, you can't do that.
Yeah, and in theory, I mean, they barely lost to Wesley in overtime. So you could make an argument that just based on the eye test that they should be number 5, just
And
behind
they might
Wesley.
be. They might be.
They might.
I don't
Yeah.
think yet that they're going to do it. The committee knows they have to play Salisbury yet. So they could say, look, let your strength of schedule rebound, go beat Salisbury. You do those two things, we'll put you up there. Why does this matter? Because there's a certain importance to how high your first Pool C candidate is appearing in your regional rankings. The committee's going to look at it and say, we're really talking about the number 9 team in the East, which we don't think is the strongest region as it is. So are we really going to consider number 9? No. Okay, somebody's going to win a Union RPI. The loser drops off probably is what's going to happen above it. So there's one spot. Western New England, if Curry beats them, obviously clears the way for Frostburg to go up another step. But Frostburg could leap them anyway as their strength of schedule improves. They have Kane, who's going to help it slightly, and Salisbury, who will help it immensely. It should be around 500 by the time we're said and done. So Frostburg State could very well be, they could jump them early. They could put them at number 6 right now, and I wouldn't be surprised by it. But I don't think you can justify it with that strength of schedule currently. 459 is in the 190s range, I think, nationally right now, out of 240 teams. So we'll see. Number 10, WestCon, 7-1 with a 500 strength of schedule and a loss versus the unranked team. But, Plymouth State's out there probably wondering, what about us? And here are the 3 teams that we sort of had the next teams out in no particular order. Albright, Salisbury, Plymouth State. If Western Connecticut is ranked at number 10, there's no room for you at the end here, Plymouth State, right now. If you end up staying at one loss, you will find your way in by the end. But what will it mean if you didn't win the conference? Not much. You are not going to be above a Frostburg State in consideration, Plymouth State. This is just a newsflash of newsflashes. In fact, you better hope that Springfield goes early, goes at Pool B, let's say, instead of Pool C, because to even get to the table at any point in time, the teams above you have to be cleared out. Springfield going the first round, well, there you have an East team already taken, and so they're going to basically, as a committee, say, well, we just took an East team. Now, yes, they're human. This is not criteria, but they're human. There are a lot of teams in the West and, maybe even the South and the North that rise to a much better resume pack than Plymouth State does and even Frostburg State. So Frostburg State's on the outside looking in to a certain degree. Plymouth State's really never going to see that light of day.
And it's compounded a little bit by a number of factors. And one of the things that you and I talked about sort of off the air was the fact that in the President's Athletic Conference, you could have a situation with 2 teams that finish 10-0. The Pool A bid will go by, I think, some type of points-based tiebreaker. But effectively, it just that's just another obstacle for any 9-1 team to get in, because most part you finish the season undefeated. The committee pretty much is going to give this give those teams a shot over ones that have a loss. You're
right about that, and let's now transition to what to look for this week. Let's go through some slates here. I did a lot of pre-production work or post-production work, as the case may be, here to get you some graphics so you could see it. But let's look at the meaningful games on November 4th. For the CCC, you've got Salve Regina at Becker at noon and Western New England at Curry at 1 o'clock. If Salve loses, the Western New England Curry winner wins the automatic qualifier. If Salve wins, well, you'll at least have a share of the win. I don't know if the CCC does any tiebreakers or not to declare who the conference champion is, but we only really care about the AQ at the end of the day. So if Salve Regina loses, Western New England Curry is to the conference championship game. If not, well, I'm not going to bet against the winner of that game to win the conference outright, ultimately. We'll talk about tiebreakers we need to later. In the ECFC, a Husson win gives them the automatic qualifier automatically against Alfred State at noon. SUNY Maritime has to hope at 1 o'clock against Dean that if Husson loses, then they win, because if they lose also, then it's over as well. But Husson controls their own destiny on Saturday. In the MASCAC, remember that Framingham State is only alive if Plymouth State loses. That's a sad but true thing, because remember that they've got the extra game already in the conference played. So this is it for them in the conference schedule, I believe, for Plymouth State. Correct me if I'm wrong in that.
That's right. They don't play in Week 11.
WestCon at Framingham State at noontime. WestCon wins the automatic qualifier with a win and a Plymouth State loss. So keep an eye on that. But Plymouth State would win the automatic qualifier if WestCon loses and they win. So it's possible we could crown a champion this week, but the name of it could be Plymouth State.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
who may not even be on the regional rankings.
True. Well, that would change probably the following week.
Yeah.
UMAC, Pool B is what's at stake here. Don't forget. So we can't automatically ordain anybody. We can talk about who wins the conference at least. Springfield and Maine Maritime. If Springfield wins, they win at least a share of the UMAC title. But Norwich at MIT could help determine something too at 5:30. That's outside of what time frame we'll be kind of essentially watching games, but they must win if Springfield wins to remain, at least to have a chance to share the title with Springfield.
Yeah, and if we're being honest, I mean, Maine Maritime and Norwich are definitely going to be pretty heavy underdogs in those games. So, kind of expecting Springfield and MIT to take care of business, but we'll see.
Empire 8. So only one game to really feature here. Alfred at Brockport. Alfred wins. We'll talk a little bit more next week about what happens, because at that point we'll have a tie situation, and the last games for each team will play a role, obviously. Brockport wins. Done. Brockport wins. And also wipes out any hopes for the Empire 8 of getting two teams in. If Alfred beats Brockport, the Empire 8 probably gets two teams in. That's an interesting scenario to think about later on. But Brockport is well regarded right now. We know that. We'll see how it plays out. Liberty League. RPI Rochester at noon will help us determine if Union Ithaca is the league championship game or not, but it will be going on during that game. If RPI loses to Rochester, which is a long shot, obviously, Union Ithaca is for the championship. If not, the winner of Union Ithaca can still win the league, the loser cannot. It's that simple. Then it's up to the Dutchman Shoes game, and the winner of the Dutchman Shoes game will determine what happens. So if Union loses, Ithaca will root for Union the next week, because Ithaca would win the conference if RPI win the Dutchman Shoes game. If Union wins this game, and assuming RPI beats Rochester, then the Dutchman Shoes participants are the only two that can win the conference at that point, Union, RPI. Make sense?
Okay. Yeah, clear as mud.
Yep. Glad it could help. NJAC. Wesley would win the AQ with a win against Salisbury, because they've already beat Frostburg State and couldn't fall below one loss against teams they've already beaten, and Salisbury plays Frostburg next week. That's simple. Salisbury wins the AQ if Frostburg and Wesley lose on Saturday. And look, Kane isn't a terrible team, so an upset could happen.
Yep.
So Wesley or Salisbury could win the conference this weekend. Frostburg would need some help and to play the Week 11 game and win against Salisbury in the process. So there's how that works.
Yeah.
Wesley, though, is got the easiest pathway to winning the conference this weekend. MAC, another clear one. Del Val beats Misericordia. We're not done talking about the conference. They at least share the MAC title at that point. But Del Val and Widener win, we go to a decider on Week 11. If Del Val wins and Widener loses, and Kings isn't a horrible team this season, that's for sure, then Del Val wins it outright. If Del Val loses, we still have to talk about Week 11 no matter what at that point. So Del Val wins, then look at the Widener game. If Widener wins as well, go to Week 11. And we didn't talk about the NESCAC. Let's now kind of cover that in our coverage earlier. So from this past week's games, the Trinity game was a little bit of a lopsided affair, obviously, against Middlebury.
Yeah.
We thought it would be a little bit more of a challenge, but Trinity kind of bounces back from a little bit of a scare earlier and beats them soundly. And so that puts them in a position now with Amherst that there's only one team with one loss left between Trinity and the two loss teams, and that's Amherst. Amherst could basically win the title of the NESCAC if they beat Trinity and then win in Week 11. Or Trinity wins it outright in Week 10 with a win versus Amherst. So that's how this all plays out at the end of the day. The 9 conferences all have key games this weekend, all games that affect the eventual outcome. Some may have decisions, many will not by the end of this week, and we'll have some exciting games for Week 11.
Yeah. I think it's Amherst, Frank. Because say that little accent, Amherst.
Amherst? Sorry.
Amherst.
My bad.
I think you pronounce the H.
The former Lord Jeffs, now the Mammoths.
That's right. Now the Mammoths.
With the H.
Yeah.
So I won't comment further than that. James, takeaways from Week 9 as we go to 35-plus minutes here at this point.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of stuff up in the air, which makes this weekend exciting. It's like I said before, we've seen a couple of teams around the nation punch tickets to the playoffs. There's going to be a few more potentially this Saturday, and as we move forward, Wednesday we'll look at the regional rankings. We'll do some predictions later on in the week on these games that we've been talking about. And then the following week, it'll probably be kind of the same thing. There'll be another round of regional rankings released on the 8th, and we'll try to kind of predict how those teams are going to either rise and fall depending on how it goes in Week 10, and then kind of leads up to the grand finale with the weekend of November 11th, with all the final regular season games being played, a lot of senior days and so on. And then we're going to look at how the playoff field is going to come together. And so far, fingers crossed, knock on wood, we have been able to book the chair of the NCAA selection committee every season to talk about how the brackets come out. And, we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at the playoff matchups and how things are going to go from there. So a lot of fun stuff coming up in the next couple weeks. Hey, look at you, ref.
We're going to have to officiate this whole thing, so I figured we get the stripes on at this point because obviously there's a lot of people that are going to be concerned or hurt by how things play out here in terms of how the committee views things. And we're going to have to keep, teams apart here and let each side describe what happened and what their case is as well. So stick with us this week. Wednesday, about a half an hour or so after the regional rankings are released, we'll go live with them and walk you through what it all means, because the first ones matter a lot to people as to how the view of the NCAA exists at this point in time. So tune in then. Make sure you spread the word, share this so that other people know that we're out there come Wednesday. If they like our page, they'll see us pop up as a live event at that point in time. James, let's roll on out of here. This is Host Chat for Week 9. We will not have any other guests this week in terms of interview guests because of On the Road and with all the other stuff coming up. But we got plenty of stuff coming up this week. Stay tuned. And we're still talking about possibly Saturday, whipping around the East and talking about some of these 15 or 14 games I think we just ran through. I guess 13 because I'm not waiting for Norwich MIT to start at 5:30. Who scheduled that this late in the season at that time? Yo, Martinovich, what's with that one?
Right.
We'll be trying to maybe get some rights to whip you around through it in case you are interested in the entire East region scenario, because you'll see when the regional rankings come out how interconnected everything really is here in this region. Until then, James, great job this weekend, and thank you very much.
You do.
See you soon, folks, as they say.
That's right. See ya.